Hello, this is Craig James for MasculineByDesign.com. This is the Masculine by Design Mancast. Today's episode is on the power of standards. So before I get started, I just want to say thank you to those of you who have been listening to the podcast, looking at watching the videos on YouTube. I really appreciate all your support. If you do enjoy these podcasts, please do me a favor and go to iTunes. There are links on MasculineByDesign.com that you can use to go to iTunes directly to the podcast there, where you can leave a review, preferably a 5-star review. Those reviews really help get this Masculine by Design Mancast up in the search rankings within iTunes algorithm. Just helps me and helps all of us to reach Americans, reach the world with the message of masculinity. So it'll only take a few seconds of your time. I'd really appreciate if you would do that. Also, if you have not done so already, please make sure you go to MasculineByDesign.com and pick up your free copy of my book, Masculine by Design, where I explore 4 principles that I think have been lost on men today that will help you to unlock the power of masculinity that's inside of you that has been repressed by society and all the outside factors that are telling us that our masculinity is toxic, that we should repress it, that it should be suppressed because it's not good for us, it's not good for our families, it's not good society. But at the end of the day, that's a bunch of BS. It's nonsense. Our masculinity was given to us for a purpose, and in that book, Masculine by Design, I explore a lot of the reasons as to why that is and how you can use that to your advantage. So be sure to go to MasculineByDesign.com and pick up a copy of your book. So today, again, I want to talk about the power of standards. So when we think about standards, basically all a standard is, and this is my definition, I think it's accurate with what you would find online on something like Webster or something analogous to that. But basically, a standard is simply an objective that we can use as a baseline to measure our decisions and actions against. And so there are standards in many different areas. And so I have an engineering background. I have an electrical engineering degree, and that's where I work. That's the field that I work in. And so just looking at engineering, we deal with units of measurement a lot, and that could be, length, flow, pressure, temperature, whatever. So just looking at standards that we use in regards to length. So, for instance, the meter. So 1 meter. Well, actually, it's kind of an interesting history actually as to how humanity has defined 1 meter over time. So back in 1790, the meter was first defined as being 1/10,000,000th the distance between the equator and the North Pole. So as you can imagine, that's very conceptual. It's hard to grasp. It's not something that we could really use in an everyday format to actually use it to design anything from. And so that was in 1790. Then in 1889, the powers that be actually created a metal bar. It was actually made of platinum iridium. There were 2 thin lines. I believe they were engraved into this bar. And so those 2 thin lines were on different ends of the bar, and the distance between those 2 lines was 1 meter. That's how it was defined. So again, that could be replicated and sent around to different parts of the world, but this bar was stored in France, in Paris. So unless you had access to that specific bar, there was really no way to know that what you were measuring as 1 meter was truly 1 meter. As we can see with like the game of telephone and whatnot, when somebody makes a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, there are things that are going to be lost in that translation. So that standard wasn't really that good. It wasn't that objective, or you couldn't have complete faith that the measurement you were considering 1 meter was truly 1 meter. And so then, somewhat recently in 1983, the length of a meter was redefined as being the distance that light travels in a vacuum in around 3.3 nanoseconds. So again, this is kind of like with the 1/10,000,000th of the distance between the equator and the North Pole. It's kind of tough to conceptualize or grasp just from knowing that it's the distance that light travels in 3.3 nanoseconds. However, it is something that can be calculated. It's something that's objective. It's immune from decay. It can't be destroyed. Anybody can calculate that anywhere they are in the world at any time. So it's a much better standard. So it's objective. And so when you think about the importance of that standard being a standard, being objective, being true, being something that people can use in everyday uses. So in engineering or architecture, construction, right? So we have to build to an objective standard. So the construction team that built my house were building off of a blueprint that had all the dimensions for the walls, the foundations, the piping, the electrical conduits, and everything that goes into building this house. There were dimensions for that. And those dimensions were based on a unit of measurement. Here in the U.S., it was probably feet and inches versus meters, but the same rules apply. So if there was no faith in what that unit of measurement meant, so if the people building this house didn't know how long a foot was, and so each person had their own idea of what that is because there was no objective standard for that, there was no way they could have built a structurally sound house that was going to match the blueprints that were drawn up by the architecture. Taking it back that step further, the architect who was building the blueprints would have really no way of knowing how to designate the length of distances between certain points or walls or whatever. So without an objective standard, actions are meaningless, is kind of the analogy I'm trying to draw here. Again, a construction team can't build a home if the units that are on the blueprint are meaningless. There is no standard. They don't know exactly what the distance is for each of the unit of measurements being used. And so for men, we need to have standards for our lives. We need to set those standards in alignment with the things that we want to achieve, with the direction we want our lives to take. And those standards need to be based on some objective baseline that we can measure against. So as an example, I have some standards that I follow. One, I don't allow myself to get drunk. And so here you may see this beer that I'm drinking. This is a non-alcoholic beer. Very tasty. I thank Ed Lattimore, at Ed Lattimore on Twitter, by the way. One of the best Twitter follows that I can recommend for any of you listening. But Ed wrote a post about what he's learned from not drinking. And as a Christian, I believe that getting drunk is deleterious to that lifestyle. It takes us away from the desires and the will that God has for us. It allows us to lose control of ourselves, which to a certain point, that's kind of the allure of alcohol. It's relaxing. But most people take that too far when they drink, and it goes to excess, and then they are no longer in control of themselves, and they act in ways that they normally wouldn't, that they don't really want to act. And I've noticed this with myself. When I became a Christian, I didn't just stop sinning overnight, and so there were times where I would have a few drinks and I would go too far, and I would always regret that because I wouldn't be in control. So anyway, not getting drunk is one of my standards. It's what I try to adhere to, and so I've taken steps around that. One of those steps is drinking non-alcoholic beer, which Ed Lattimore had gone into in his posting. Which I'll link to on YouTube and within the post for this article on Masculine by Design once I get it up. But so not getting drunk, that's a standard that I have for myself, and there are a lot of benefits to that. There's a reason that I have that standard. So one, it violates my faith to get drunk, so I don't do it for that reason. Another reason is that it kills my productivity. When I'm drinking, I'm usually not fully in my mental capacity, so I'm not able to think as clearly. And granted, a lot of times when people have drinks, they're not looking to work or be productive. But it's not just for that time that you're drinking that you're affected. Even just having a few beers, I would notice that the next morning I wouldn't be at my full capacity. I would be groggy. I wouldn't have the energy that I normally have. I would have kind of this cloud over my brain that I just wasn't thinking very clearly. And that affects you. That affects my work performance. That affects my ability to solve problems. It affects my outlook on life, my mood. And so that's just something that's not acceptable to me. So I don't get drunk. Another standard that I have, I eat whole foods a majority of the time. So yes, I have cheat meals sometimes that I indulge in. I'll have pizza. I'll have wings. I'll eat things that are not whole foods or completely nutritious at times, but the majority of the time what I feed my body is whole nutritious foods. So nothing processed. I limit those things. That's part of I think what all men should be doing in terms of their diet, because their hormones are going to be all screwed up if they don't feed their body well. It causes all kinds of other illnesses, diabetes, Alzheimer's. There's so many things that we know are tied into how we eat, cancers. And so these are things that we should be taking precautionary measures against. These are things that we cannot allow to infiltrate our bodies. As men, we need to be taking care of our bodies so that we look and feel our best, and our bodies can function to the optimum potential that they have. In that regard, I also exercise my body 5 days a week, so that's a standard for me. Sometimes I might work out 6 or 7 days a week, but I always make sure to get in at least 5 sessions of exercise, typically at least 30 minutes or longer. So that could be lifting weights, could be a brisk walk on an incline on my treadmill, it could be a jog or a run. Whatever it is, I exercise my body 5 days a week. That's a standard that I follow. So if I don't hit that, I'm missing that standard. I'm missing that objective standard. I'm falling short, and that's not something that I've determined to be good for me. I maintain a positive attitude at work, regardless of the circumstances. That's something that I've set as a standard for my life, is that no matter what's going on at work, no matter how challenging a situation might be, or how annoying a coworker might be, or some project that I have to work on, I don't allow that to dampen my spirits. Or I continue to work with a positive attitude, meet challenges head on, have irrational self-confidence, and that's something that's really been a huge benefit to me, and I think to my company and to those I work with as well, because they thrive off of that. They gain energy when they see that I'm enduring through tough circumstances that they may be going through, and they see how I'm handling it, and they feed off that. And it's also helped me in my progression at my company as well, and I believe that it will continue to do so. Another standard that I have, I do something every single day to exercise my mind. I don't go through life ignoring my mind. I don't just take care of my body. I take care of my mind. I take care of my spirit as well. So I make sure that I'm reading, that I'm writing, I'm doing a podcast, I'm taking notes on something that I've observed. I think deeply about things. These are things that I think every man needs to do. A lot of men, they focus so much on their bodies, their outward appearance, and they don't focus on their mind. But the mind is truly our power source. It's where everything that we do starts in the mind. Before that decision can be made for us to act, or before a solution can be implemented, we have to think it. We have to conceptualize it. So we need to be exercising our minds, and that's a standard that I have for myself, is that every single day I do something to stimulate my mind. And I don't mean smoke marijuana. I'm talking about reading, writing, podcasting, reading a thought-provoking book. I actually, when preparing for this podcast, where I got the information from on how 1 meter used to be defined, I was going back and reading an old chemistry book from college, from my chemistry classes. So it's just important that we continue to stay sharp. And I think a lot of people, when they get older and they don't think as clearly, they just don't feel as sharp as they once were. The mind is just like a muscle. If you don't move it, if you don't exercise it, it's going to atrophy. And so be intentional about that. Exercise your mind on a daily basis, just like you do your body. Your body is going to decay. It's going to atrophy. It's not going to be up to its best performance if you're not taking care of it and exercising it, moving it. The same thing is true with your mind. So you need to be diligent about taking care of your mind just like you are your body. And that's a standard that I have for myself, and I certainly think that all of you listening should have as well. Finally, a standard that I have, and there are many more that I have. I would be here for a couple of hours if I went through everything every standard that I hold myself to. But the last one here is that I refuse to compare myself to others. So, and this ties right into this message of the power of standards. Our standards are ours alone. We cannot compare how we perform against somebody else's standards or what they might be achieving in their life. So that's why having standards are so important, because they ground us. They ground us into the things that we want to accomplish for our lives based on our goals and our ambition. So we can't be comparing ourselves to others. There's always going to be somebody who has a leg up on us, and it's really easy to get jealous, or maybe allow it to make us complacent because we feel like there's somebody else who's so far ahead, or they've achieved so much more, and that's where we want to get eventually, and it just discourages us because we don't see any way we can go from where we are now to where they are. So we need to compare ourselves to our own standards. Don't compare ourselves to others, and that's a standard that I have for myself, that I don't compare myself to others. And that's a trap that's easy to fall into. There are many times where I see something that somebody else has, or something that someone else is doing, or a lifestyle that someone else is living, and it's easy to kind of get jealous about that and wish that I had that. But there's no good that comes from that. Being jealous or wanting something someone else has, Now, if you want to use that to set a standard for yourself that is going to help you get to that point in your life, that's fine. But that's what you need to compare yourself to, is the standard that you've set to reach that point in life or reach that goal. You don't compare yourself to what someone else has or what someone else is doing, because there's no good that comes of that. That's only a negative. So that's really all that I have for this podcast. But I just encourage you to set standards for your own life. Find out what it is. You probably already have standards. You may not even know it. You're probably already doing things that you've figured out are good for you. And so you've centered your life around a certain set of standards. So think about those things. Think about what your standards are and how you apply them. And also think about what other standards you would like to have for your life, so that way you can continue to progress. You can continue to build the life that you desire. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to go very far in life if you contradict the actions that you need to take to get there. So having standards allows you to really think through, where do you want to be in life? What standards do I need to get there? And then by having those standards, you have an objective baseline that you can compare yourself against. Am I meeting this standard? Yes. Okay, good. I need to keep doing that. If I'm not, then I know I need to make changes in my life so I can start meeting that standard. And so I hope you use that. It's been extremely powerful in my life. And I think so many men drift through life without purpose, without meaning. And one of the best ways that a man can infuse purpose into his life is by giving himself standards to follow. That's an immediate injection of purpose. Once you have standards, that's your purpose, is to adhere to those standards. Now there are definitely other ways you can give your life purpose. But this is a great start. Standards have to be there before you can ever determine what your purpose is. Standards are the foundation of your purpose. So think about what it is that you want for your life. Develop a set of standards around that, and stick to it. Follow those standards and use those as your plumb line to know if you're getting off track, and correct course if you are. So thanks for listening again. Please take a few moments and go to iTunes, give me a 5-star rating. Let me know what you like about this podcast on there. That'll really help my search rankings, help get this message out that I'm bringing at least on a weekly basis, and I hope to be more frequent with these to more men, because men need it. Men are suffering, they're hurting, they're going through meaningless lives. They're hurting because they don't know how they can get from where they are to where they want to be, and that's the purpose of this podcast. So please go to iTunes, give me a positive review so I can get this message out there. If you'd like me to talk about a certain subject on a future podcast, please feel free to leave me a comment under this YouTube video, or you can contact me through my website at masculinebydesign.com. Again, make sure you go to masculinebydesign.com to get your free copy of my book, Masculine by Design. So thanks again for listening. Until next time, this is Craig James. I'm out.